Welcome back, everyone, to episode number 2 of the Woodward Pistons Draft Show. Today, we are going to talk about possible picks for the Pistons at number 31, first pick in the second round. And who better to talk about second round draft picks than Mr. Draft Deeper himself? Worked as an assistant with EV Hoops before, used to be a contributor with the Beale Street Bears, was an editor over at Fansided, also now is the content manager over at No Ceilings, which is where some of you might have seen him and seen his work, is the founder of Draft Deeper, which has been operating since I think August 2020, if I have that date correct. So been at it for a minute. Of course, it is Nathan Grubel, Mr. Draft Deeper, also a Temple University alum. So you know he's well studied. So thank you so much for joining us. Let the people know where they can find you.
Steve, first of all, that was a fantastic introduction. You did that was great research by you. You're a professional host. You didn't ask me for any of that information, so I'm impressed. But you can always find me on social media at Draft Deeper. And then, as Steve said, all of my work is available right now at NoCeilingsNBA.com, as well as on the podcast feed and YouTube channel.
Yeah, and if you're not subscribed to No Ceiling Substack, it's absolutely free. If you love the draft, if you want to know more about the next generation of basketball, they not only do breakdowns like I do for my Substack, but they interview a ton of guys coming up. So they have firsthand access to a bunch of players. I know the draft deck guys, Albert and Corey, and then the Tylers, they went to the Portland for the Nike Hoop Summit, I believe.
Yep.
So look out for that. Go listen to the pod for sure. So again, today though, we're talking about Pistons here at pick number 31. So we just want to start this conversation asking Draft Deeper here, what do you think the Pistons' biggest needs are?
So I can run through a lot of the numbers, Steve. I think you probably know a lot of these answers as you've been discussing on a Pistons podcast, but there's areas of opportunity virtually everywhere, except for, I would say, you guys do have a solid squad for the future in terms of rebounding. I think you guys have that area covered on both sides of the ball, but efficient offense would be great to have. We can run through some of those numbers, but I will give a little bit of a cheat answer, and then I'll give you where I think they need to go in the draft positionally. I think you guys just need experience, right? And I honestly, I love a lot of the young pieces that the Pistons have in place. Cade Cunningham, Jaden Ivey, Jalen Duren. You can go on the bench and go Isaiah Stewart, Livers. Like, I like a lot of the young pieces you guys have in place, but with young teams, that lack of inexperience, it shows up not only on offense, but certainly on defense as well, right? Defense is made up. It's not just physical talent. It's also chemistry. It's developing that, playing together over a number of years, figuring out where everyone likes to be, where they need to be. So I do think over a few more years, if you guys just have the time to coalesce, the Pistons will be right where they need to be in the Eastern Conference. But outside of that, when we talk about positional needs, efficient offensive players at the 3/4 spot, right? That combo forward spot. You have Bojan Bogdanovic in there right now as a veteran who he's an absolute mainstay, one of the best shooters we've seen in the NBA over the last 5 to 6 years. Love that. Great. Marvin Bagley is a piece who you're bringing off the bench, but outside of the names that I can list off, like Bojan, like Bagley, Stewart, Livers, Alec Burks can play the small forward if he needs to. Jared Rhoden's an interesting second round undrafted combo piece that they were able to find and bring in from last year's draft. But none of those names are necessarily stopping me from drafting like a small forward or power forward, maybe a combo. So that to me would be where I would try to target not just one pick, but I think multiple picks. Because Steve, you probably agree with me, as would a lot of the Pistons audience. Those forwards that I listed off, they lend themselves more to that 4, possibly playing small ball 5, than scaling down to like that small forward more on that wing position.
Yeah, we will circle back to this idea of a combo forward, but I'm glad that you started there because, yeah, defense and experience, we've been saying that a lot is experience. There does need to be more of a leader, maybe in at least 1 or 2 more positions to get guys lined up in the right spot. I mean, defense mostly is about communication. Yes, you have to be athletic. Yes, you have to have movement skills and fluidity, but if you're not communicating, then none of that stuff matters. So yeah, I feel you right there. So at number 31, let's just list off 3 names from you, Mr. Draft Deeper, of who could realistically be there at number 31. And for the audience, what I mean by realistically is if we go look at draft boards, we look at mock drafts, we're not saying like, oh, maybe, I don't know, Ryan Rupier is going to fall to 31, or like, oh, maybe Gigi Jackson falls down in the second round. It's like, no, like consistently, players that are ranked at the end of round one, beginning of round two. Who, Mr. Draft Deeper, do you realistically see there at number 31 that the Pistons should select?
I'll give you three names and then I'll let you tell me where you want to start first. So realistic targets at 31, Jordan Walsh out of Arkansas, should he declare and ultimately be in this draft. I think that 25 to 35 range is good for him. Julian Strother out of Gonzaga, I think he's another guy who's going to be available in that range. And then Jalen Wilson out of Kansas, another pretty realistic target in that range. So you tell me out of those three guys, which one of those do you like the most? Who gets me more excited?
Well, I'm the most excited about Jordan Walsh by far there. So
Okay.
let's start with Jordan Walsh.
Sure. So if you've watched Jordan Walsh at Arkansas, you know that he was a part of the highly touted freshman class for the Hogs coming in. Defensive first wing, right? Absolute nasty defender with legitimate size, legitimate length. As Steve said, it's the communicative part, it's the experience part. But when you look at the physical tools, the measurables, the foot speed, the angles that he can play defensively, the number of positions he can guard, he has all of the tools to be not only just a good to great team / help defender, but also potentially be a lockdown defender on the perimeter, certainly guarding twos, threes, likely scaling up to fours as he continues to fill out. And then you can have him defend ones depending on the action that he's involved in, whether it be ball screen offense, coming in, defending a handoff, etc. There's just so many different ways in which you can use him defensively. But Steve, I'm excited about the offense with him. I think there's more to his game as it continues to develop that he could show. I think he has legitimate slashing ability. I like his handle off the bounce. He actually showed some promising vision as a secondary playmaker. We know he's an interior finisher. And then as a spot up guy, maybe the results weren't there on the jumper that we would want to see at this point with him coming into the draft, but the confidence in him taking those shots certainly got there from the start of the season all the way up through the tournament run that Arkansas went on. He may not have made a lot of threes in the tournament for a lot of the audience that was probably watching in the NCAAs, but he was at least taking those shots confidently in step. The form looks good. It's just a matter of reps and further practice and development. So when you throw all of those things together, that's the type of wing I think the Pistons could really use to build around for the long term.
Yeah, I couldn't agree more. The other two things I want to highlight is if you look at Jordan Walsh's numbers, they're going to underwhelm you, right? But there's also another defensive-minded wing that as a freshman in the NCAA, as a freshman just put up 6.4 points per game, 3.2 rebounds, was under 1 assist, 1.1 steal, under 1 block, under 1 turnover. Shooting splits for this freshman were 71.6% from 2-point range on just 2.2 shots per game, 29.9% from 3-point range on 1.9 from 3. You're like, oh, that looks bad. And then 78.7% from the free throw line on 1.9 attempts per game. This is Mikal Bridges. The numbers are very similar to Jordan Walsh. Obviously, the 2-point percentage is going to be different. Like Mikal got a bunch of just wide open shots because the other guys on those Villanova teams were getting double and triple teams sometimes. That would be my pitch for anybody that wants Jordan Walsh is like, look at that and look at Mikal's tape of that year as a freshman too. It's same thing. You can see the defense, his length. He just gets after it. And the other thing that I really like in Jordan Walsh's profile right now, I'm looking at his shot chart courtesy of cbbanalytics.com. He is 52 of 79, Jordan Walsh, at the rim, which is 65.8%. That's good. Yep. He has a clear skill of being able to get to the line and get to the rim, and then hopefully can draw it out to be able to get to the line more. So yeah, the 3-point shot is concerning, right? He didn't shoot it well, but there are a lot of people that are starting to come around to like shooting is an easier skill to teach than other things of like feel and whatever. And the main reason I've been arguing for Jordan Walsh is I keep saying this Pistons team needs a Sheed. They need a Rasheed Wallace. And every bit of tape I ever watched on Jordan Walsh, he's just a mad trash talker. Like he never stops. He's in your face. He's one of those players that you hate to face, but you love to have on your team. And this Pistons team needs that guy who's just obsessed with defense and is just going to talk mad trash and help you out, even just in motivation, I guess, for lack of a better word.
Yep, absolutely. I think the one point to come back to before we would possibly move to another player, when you talk about shooting, Steve, you mentioned how it is a little bit easier to develop than some of the other skills. I would agree with that. in point, because when you watch Jordan again, I see the comfort level, the confidence when he's shooting the ball. If it looks natural to him, right? If he's willing to take those shots and it doesn't throw him out of his rhythm or his game, I'm buying that he's going to do the work to put in as far as, making the slight tweaks to his follow through, his jump shot, and he's going to get there as a shooter more so than someone, not to necessarily bring up Amen Thompson, but just like using him as an example. I'm not buying him as a shooter in the slightest whatsoever. It's not just because there's a large mechanical tweak that he needs to make, but it's also because when you watch him with Overtime Elite, he is not comfortable taking a jump shot whatsoever. It just looks so unnatural and unnerving to him. That's not the case with Jordan Walsh. So I can buy into him, maybe not being the off the bounce threat of somebody like a Bridges, but developing along that path in terms of being a spot up shooter.
Yeah, I couldn't agree more. If you're turning down open looks, that's when I tend to not buy into you as a shooter with Amen Thompson, which is like keeping it real, right? Which is why you bring that up. Amen turns down open looks, whereas Jordan Walsh is like, nope, I got to put this up. So, yep. Yeah, absolutely. All right, let's move on to the one that I'm probably the least excited about is Julian Strawther.
Really? Okay. So I would be more excited about Julian Strawther than I would Jalen Wilson. In certain respects. So Julian, to me, he's a legitimate wing shooter, right? We know he's excellent at spot ups, cuts. He has legit floater touch in the lane. I get that the defense is worrisome, especially on the perimeter. I've gone as far to say that Julian Strawther's defense has looked horrible at times at Gonzaga, but he is a competitive guy. He's a plus rebounder. He has gotten better at making decisions with the ball on the move. And again, him being a lethal catch and shoot guy, that's the type of bigger wing that you would want surrounding someone like a Cade or an Ivy, right? When those guys actually put pressure on the rim, they get 2 feet in the paint, they have to kick it out. They want to have a guy they're kicking it out to they can trust to knock down the shot. And at least Julian Strawther has proven that. But just his off-ball equity in general makes me excited to find someone like him in that 25 to 35 range. Do I think he has, star level upside? No, I don't. Do I think he has high-end starter upside? Because of the defense, probably not. But is he a guy who I bet to be a rotational player 2, 3, 4 years from now and earn a second contract? I would say yes as the answer to that question. And that's why when you can get a guy like that at the back end of the first round, early second, to me, you jump on an opportunity like that. And that's why I would buy into someone like Strawther.
Yeah, I get it offensively. 52, 40, 40, and then 77. Those are shooting splits on just over 15 points per game. Like, you want that next to Cade Ivey. You don't want another guy who's just going to dribble the air out of the ball.
Yep.
Right? Like you just said, feed me open looks. I'm going to knock him down. Defensively, I just have so many worries. I don't think this Piston team can handle another defensive project to be nice.
Sure.
Right? It's already a young guy. If they really want to push for even like 35 wins, then this is somebody that more or less comes off the bench, which isn't a problem. But if the long-term projection says I'm not going to be a good defender, that more or less worries me. And also, like, what is his comp? If you had to give him one, that's just where I'm at. Is like, I would buy into it if somebody said he's more of like blah, 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 rather than blah, blah, blah. Like, is this 6'7" Wayne Ellington, who's fine, but like, I kind of want more than Wayne Ellington, right? Is this like Reggie Bullock, who would be okay and is worth taking at 31, right? Reggie Bullock went at the end of round 1. Or is this somebody of like maybe Desmond Bane that we're overlooking and we just think of as a shooter and has these other things that can be unlocked in the league?
No, offensively, he is more along the lines of like a Reggie Bullock type. He's not the Desmond Bane, because Desmond Bane, to his credit, he had way more skills as a combo guard than I think people wanted to give him credit for at TCU. He was one of the best passers in that class at TCU. And I get like he's not as dynamic on the ball at the NBA level as he was able to be in college, but you still see that vision come through when he has those opportunities to make the right reads and find the right lanes. I don't see that level of upside from Strawther. I don't think he's a really good one-on-one creator necessarily. He is your spot up guy. He can find the back door on cuts. It's where I was initially scared about Strawther was his role at Gonzaga has been very similar to the type of role that Joel Ayayi played at Gonzaga. And Ayayi's been a guy who he's struggling to stay in the league, despite how much I liked him coming out. Like, I had a late first, early second round grade on him because I thought he was one of those perfect complementary pieces on the wing. But his size really came back to bite him in the butt. Well, that's not the case with Strother. Strother's a legit 6'7", 6'8". He has good length. I think he is strong enough to finish through some contact when he has a tough matchup around the basket. It's just defensively, it's not necessarily the strength that gives me cause to pause, because again, you have to buy into that if you believe in his rebounding ability, but it's the foot speed. It's his lateral mobility. It's his technique as far as how he swings his hips, how he's able to keep certain guys in front of him. Do you buy him playing a lot of high level defense and ball screen actions? Like all of those questions, I would answer no. So I get it. Like if you guys don't want another defender on your roster comparable to like Livers, for example, like I get it if you want somebody better than that. But if you're just looking at his offensive toolbox and what you guys would want out of like a top 8, top 9 player, I can absolutely buy into somebody like Strother. But no, I don't really have a great comp for him. So if you are like a comp guy and not having a good one scares the living daylights out of you, I get the hesitancy completely.
The other thing that I want to bring up, last thing on Julian Strother, is Corey Tolliba and the Tylers did a pod there in Portland where they're doing different prospect pitches, and they did one on Julian Strother here, and they brought up the low release point on his shot. I think that's like, that one's hard to project of being like a quote unquote problem, right? How should that factor into how you view Strother?
I don't view it as a problem at all on the spot up shooting because he's comfortable getting it off. But when you try to project him as a higher level creator, right? So he's not getting off the ground too high on his jumper, right? In terms of where he actually gets up. So if you have a lower release point and you're not getting off the ground ball vertically, well, guys are going to be able to challenge that shot a lot easier, especially at the NBA level when you're trying to pull up in the mid range. So that does make it much more difficult. You either have to be getting up off the ground vertically, or you have to have a higher release point on your shot. So it doesn't matter to me as much on the spot up and the catch and shoot stuff. But yeah, if you want to find a guy in that range, or you could project as maybe being a third, fourth level shot creator, that does worry me.
Speaking of third or fourth level shot creators, let's move on to Jalen Wilson.
So Jalen Wilson at Kansas he's shown right through his time at Kansas. He's a multi-year player, was a senior, really broke out in a big way as like a potential national player of the year candidate this year. I mean, he was on an absolute heater for the Jayhawks. But my concern with Wilson isn't necessarily the talent, right? He is a capable one-on-one scorer. He knows he can get his own shot. He can get all the way to the rim. He can be a spot-up guy, transition finisher, decent positional rebounder. He's not a net negative either when he tries to defend on guards or even some wings at the 3 spot. My concern, though, is the efficiency, right? He's kind of proven throughout his career, whether it's low volume or high volume, he's not going to be efficient for you in the slightest. And that, to me, is a worry, to where I'm a big guy in terms of buying into efficiency based on your projected role. So this is actually a discussion I've had with some other scouts on some podcasts this week. Let's say you're like a 32% three-point shooter, but you're shooting at a much higher volume in college than what you would expect it to be in the NBA. Well, if you're confident in his mechanics, if you're confident in his confidence, his consistency from a mechanical standpoint, and you think if you lower the volume, that percentage is going to come up, that's something I can absolutely buy into, right? But if you're a higher volume guy and you're projecting him to be a higher volume guy in the NBA and he's not showing you the efficiency, well, then what's necessarily going to change when you're going up to a more difficult level of basketball? And then if you flip both of those around, if you're not efficient from anywhere, what's necessarily going to change for you at the NBA level if you've proven no matter what your role, you're an inefficient player? And that comes back to, if I'm a coach and I'm looking to try to play this guy minutes to see him further develop, and I don't know what I'm getting from Jalen Wilson on a night-to-night basis, what am I going to buy into as a coach? What's going to give me confidence to actually give him minutes away from someone else who's already on the roster? So it makes it more difficult for Wilson to land the type of job you would expect him to have from his raw stats and his college production. So that's what worries me about Wilson. But at some point, and I can see why you might want to buy into him more than Strother, Steve, his pure talent, at some point in like that 30 to 40 range, you just got to buy in, right? And you have to give him a chance.
What would be your job for him? Say you select him at 30, 31, 35, anywhere in there. Like, what would your job be? Because those guys normally have a job like right away in the NBA, right?
So he's got to be a spot up guy from 3-point range. He has to space the floor, and then he has to be able to prove he can guard at least one position effectively at the NBA level. You would like him to guard too. The thing that worries me with Wilson is he actually measured in smaller last year at the combine than I think we were expecting. Like you look at Jalen Wilson, you think he's like a 6'7" guy. He measured in more closer to 6'5". So he's actually not terribly big out there. He's not a true wing like somebody like a Walsh or a Strother. So he's going to be more locked in guarding twos and threes. And if he's not doing that effectively, or he's not, buying in and hitting the amount of spot up shots he would want him to hit, he's not going to get those same mid-range DHO dribble pull-up opportunities in the NBA right out of the gate that he was able to in Kansas because of the type of role he had. So it gets murkier to try and project out a clear role for him if the efficiency isn't there. And that's just what concerns me with this whole case.
Yeah, I think defensively is where I buy into him the most out of these bunch, even more than Walsh. I think Walsh's long-term projection is more, but Wilson's already battle tested, right? Won a national title as a role player, had to fight his way back from being this high-level recruit. Could have easily just transferred right after the first year where he didn't get much playing time. Second year, too, was like, I don't know, but no, stuck with it, won a national title. And then this year, when they were saying they were going to feature him, people were kind of like, whatever. But like you said, National Player of the Year candidate for most of the year. If Kansas did not have Jalen Wilson, I do not know where they would have been this year, right? It was like, hey, you take over the offense, and then Grady Dick pitch in, and then everybody else just do something. that was Kansas's offense, right? I mean, nobody else under Grady Dick and Jalen Wilson had a usage percentage over like 20, something like that. So the heavy lifting he did cannot be understated. But I definitely feel you in terms of the efficiency. His career high in efficiency last year was 54.4%. As the main option this year was 54%, and then 29.7% usage. But I buy into him again because, again, he will defend. He will defend anybody, and he is physical. Every year that he got major minutes, he had a free throw attempt rate over 34.6. That's somebody that's not afraid to mix it up, right? And that's going to help too. I think he's like one of those junk players, I guess. I don't think he's exactly Jeff Green, but I think that's the closest player type I could see to where you look at Jeff Green's numbers and you're never really impressed, but then you watch him play and you're like, oh, okay, I get it now.
He found a way to get to 16 to 20 points somehow. He found
exactly. And it's like his shot's not falling tonight. So he's like, you know what, forget it. I'm gonna post up all these small guys. You know what? I can't post up any tonight. I'm just gonna drive in and get some contact. And then, my shot's falling. I'm just gonna put him up. And then we'll always play defense and work on those little things on that side. And that's just why I buy into him. Is it just seems like these kind of veteran guys that have these long careers in one system that fight through it and work their way out, even if they don't end up being like the number one or even number three guy, which I don't think Jalen Wilson will be. They end up being like this Jeff Green, where they just figure it out and they know how to do something to be a positive contributor on the basketball court every single night.
Sure. I 100% agree with that evaluation. You made a great case as to why maybe he's not even there at pick 31. Maybe he does go like the back end of the first round, and an NBA team's willing to buy into the highest of highs for him, which again may not be that third starter, but maybe it is that fourth or fifth starter, not just a bench guy. Maybe that's why he goes in the back end of the first.
Yeah. Last thing on Jalen Wilson is if somebody were to buy into him as like a creator of offense, what would be something that would indicate that?
I would certainly tell them to look at a lot of the mid-range tape he showed this year, right? Coming out of a DHO, getting that 1-2 dribble pull-up. He hit those shots at, I think, a better clip than I would reasonably expect. So that would be that level of, okay, maybe he can do something more than just spot up. I don't love the passing vision. I think it can be fine. I don't trust him to do a lot of that at the NBA level. So really, when you talk about creation, it's more self-creation out of those types of opportunities than creation for others.
Indeed. So now we move on to the part of the program where you get to pump up somebody or think about, somebody that might fall down to 31. We'll start with somebody you want Pistons fan to be like, hey, maybe this person you won't see out there, or maybe this is somebody you'll see lower than 31, but I, Draft Deeper, want you to think about this player at number 31. Who would that be?
This is a guy who I think I forget about him at times, to be honest, when I'm making a board, I'm trying to figure out who should I sort within my top 45, but Another Kansas guy, someone who didn't have the flashiest of roles last year, Kevin McCullough. Why can't Kevin McCullough potentially be a dark horse candidate at 31, right? Arguably the best potential wing defender available at this point of the draft. Let's say Jordan Walsh goes in the first round. Who else is playing better defense in this projected range than somebody like a McCullough, right? You trust him to guard multiple positions. I'm buying into the spot up shooting. I think he's a good cutter. He's a transition finisher, straight line drive finisher, and he gives you guys an experienced wing who's no nonsense. You trust him out there as a general on the defensive side of the ball. And he's going to be a glue guy. He's going to do the little things. He's going to compete night in and night out. You trust him to not only make the decisions when he has the ball in his hands in terms of, do I have to move it right away here? Am I shooting it right away here? Am I getting straight downhill right here? But you also trust him, like I said, on the defensive end and then sort of covering up the holes for everyone else. It's not just defending someone one-on-one. It's also being a more active help defender. It's helping in space. It's helping at the weak side, maybe playing a little pseudo rim protection. You might not look at him as that type of defender, but he can get up and block shots. He plays passing lanes well. So he doesn't have any sort of high-end upside, Steve, but he's just one of these guys. You can trust him to be a contributor within the top 9 of your rotation. And when you get to this point in the draft, it's harder to find those guys sometimes than people think it is. And so why not just take a glue guy who you know can probably stick around in the league for a while, earn a second, maybe even a third contract, and just be a decent player for you off the bench or as a spot starter when somebody needs minutes filled in.
Shooting is the concern with McCullough, right? How do
Yep.
you assuage concerns if somebody's like, man, this guy never shot well, whether at Texas Tech or here at Kansas, where again, he had 2 primary players in Grady Dick and Jalen Wilson that took pressure off him. He should have had more open shots. Why didn't that improve almost ever?
I would say look past the numbers a little bit, and especially this year at Kansas, look at the types of threes that he was able to hit, right? Those clutch threes, those big moment threes. When we're talking about a guy who's definitely like a 5th option for you on offense, right? He's technically the last resort. Somebody who let's look at my Philadelphia 76ers for a second. Let's look at what PJ Tucker has finally started to do for the 76ers and what he's done at other points in his career. Just being that last resort, if the ball swung around to him, can he hit a 3 from the corner? Can he hit those high pressure threes towards the end of a game when the defense is keyed in everywhere else? We've actually seen McCullough hit those shots for Kansas and hit some really big shots. He's even hit some really big pull-up 2s right in the mid-range around the free throw line area this season. So while the percentages may not jump out to you and be like, this is a guy I'm 100% buying into to shoot the ball at a higher volume, he's at least proven if he's the last line of offense, he can hit some big shots for you and still keep you in the game to bring you back defensively.
Indeed. He also pulled in 7 rebounds, and he's a very underrated passer. Like, he runs point at times. I think that's another part of his profile that really goes unnoticed. Is like
maybe not playmaker, but ball mover, I think would be a great definition for him. Yeah, somebody who's going to keep it flowing, right? And that's you guys especially do not need more guys to stop the ball, right? You have Cade, you have Ivy, Duren's going to finish it for you. You need someone who can keep the ball moving and either get the lob opportunity or kick it back out to one of your 2 creators.
Absolutely. So what about if somebody potentially fell down to 31, who might one name be that you think, I think they could fall and you probably shouldn't pass them up?
Man, I will give you a guy who 2 weeks ago, you would have asked me to do this podcast. I would have already brought him up, but now I've moved him way too far up my board, but maybe I'm completely out of consensus and maybe he's going to end up being available in that 25 to 35 range. Bilal Coulibaly out of the Met 92. I now have him at 12th on my board. You can think I'm crazy. You can think I'm a little bit out there, but I'm really buying into what he's showing on the tape. He is a very disciplined basketball player for only being 18 years old, high feel for the game, great athlete. I think he's a little bit bigger than 6'6". I think he has great length. He's a competitive rebounder. His footwork as a wing, some of the best that I've evaluated from a pure wing, like almost ever. He is one of the best Euro steps I've seen from a wing. And I'm buying into the pull-up shooting improvements he's shown. I'm buying into him becoming a better spot-up shooter. I think mechanically, everything's there with his jumper. He just has to speed that puppy up a little bit, which I think with more reps, with more time, with more seasoning, he'll be able to do. So we're talking about a guy who I'm buying as a potential 3-level scorer, multi-positional defender, good to great positional rebounder. what am I missing with somebody like Koulibaly to where I wouldn't want to take him that high? But maybe some scouts and evaluators out there still think that, he should be a guy who's a 2024 prospect. Maybe he still needs more time. We're not buying he can come in and do a lot of these things in the NBA right away. Maybe that's why he's there in that range for the Pistons. And if for whatever reason he's there, just like you guys took Perchita, I would 110% jump all over Bilal Koulibaly if he'd be there.
Yeah, can you speak a little bit more onto who he is and why he's a prospect that's kind of quote unquote come out of nowhere? Because he is the riser that like people maybe, I don't know, in January, there were kind of whispers about him, right? And then fast forward to right now, and it seems like almost everybody is trying to push him up into the first round. And I've already seen some people just come out and say, oh, he's going to be in my lottery next time. What makes a prospect like this just kind of be whispered about and then all of a sudden bam, people want to put him in the lottery?
Well, the reason why a lot of people have been talking about him is that he has been playing up with Victor Wembanyama in the A division for a while, right? If he's been up there, it's been for sparse minutes. He hasn't gotten a bigger role up until the last few weeks. But what he's done in their junior division, he has dominated the junior division. 22 points, 6 rebounds, 2.5 assists. He's averaging over 4 combined steals and blocks down there, shooting efficiently across the board, 29 PER, 62.7 true shooting percentage. That's the type of player who, if he's doing it at that level, he's going to earn a job up with the big boys. And now that he has earned that job, he had his best game this past weekend, 14 points, 6 of 8 from the field, knocked down a 3, looked really good getting to the basket, finishing through contact, defending multiple positions. That's why you haven't heard his name too much, because he's been playing, for the most part, his best games have been in that junior division. And that film, unless you have access to Synergy or Instat or whatever, that film's very hard for somebody to find. So if you don't have that type of access, you're not watching him as often as you are some of these other college guys, or even somebody like Victor, who, if Bilal's playing up with Victor, yeah, his games are on NBA.com, whatever the case may be. But if he's not, the film's just really hard to find.
And can you also explain the level of athleticism? Because everybody we've been talking about, except Jordan Walsh, like Koulibaly is like just in another level of athleticism. No offense to those guys, but again, this is why you would say maybe he does sneak up. And I think part of why so many people get excited, like what level of athlete is he compared to the field that we just talked about?
I wouldn't say he has some of the best burst in this class, but when he gets a step on somebody, Steve, he's one of these wings. He has really long strides. So he may not be moving as quick as some of these other guys, but because of the amount of steps that he has to take to get to the basket, it looks quicker than it is. But verticality, he absolutely has that pop. And then the strength. I'm really buying into how strong he is already at 18 years old. He goes up and finishes through contact, as well as vice versa on the other end. He defends guys trying to go into his body. It's like it doesn't faze him whatsoever. And he's 18 years old. So when we talk about athleticism, it's not always just the burst or the vertical pop. It's also, how is someone built physically? And I'm buying how he's built now, as well as what he's going to continue to be in the future as he gets older, as he gets to 21, 22. What's his body? What's his strength base going to look like then? If I'm already buying into your upper and lower body now, I'm probably going to be buying into it 3 to 4 years from now.
Yeah, absolutely. I think he's the one out of the ones we've talked about. Well, it'd probably be him and then Jordan Walsh. If those two are at 31, like you just can't pass them up, right?
Can't pass them up.
Of the youth and all these other things in their profile. Absolutely. We'll see if Bilal Koulibaly makes it to 31, but keep that name in mind because he is going to be talked about more and more as this draft season goes on. You know, all us draft sickos too, the minute there's a new name out there, that's all you want to discuss. So Koulibaly will be talked about much more along the way. Now we transition into my time. It's my time, as the old Triple H theme used to say. So let's talk about 3 of the names that I'm thinking about at 31. Some of these are most of these are kind of under the radar prospects. And to circle back when I asked you what's the Pistons' biggest need, I've been saying this for a while on all our channels here at Woodward Pistons. If you look on Basketball Reference right now, do you know how many small forwards are listed on this Pistons roster?
I would guess 1. I would guess
zero.
Zero are listed?
Nobody is listed as a small forward. They are either listed as a shooting guard or a power forward. Nobody is listed as a small forward. So that to me is always screaming, we need a wing. And definitely, we've been talking about defense all podcast here. everybody in Pistons land has been saying they need a wing defender. That's the number one thing that they need. And I think they just need to draft and, invest in free agency, load up on that as much as possible.
I would have said Livers would be listed as a small forward. That actually surprises me. But yeah, well, nevertheless,
he's been more of like this weak side rim protector in the second unit, and he's done a great job with it. His defense actually has been better than his shooting this year, in my opinion. And as a Michigan alum who was there for all of Livers' time, that was a big shocker to me. So kudos to Isaiah for stepping it up on the defense. But the Pistons need a wing defender, and they would need somebody who can still be efficient on offense like you started out with. So my three names are Tristan da Silva out of Colorado, 6'8", 200 pounds. The other one is somebody that made it to the Final Four, Jordan Miller out of Miami, 6'6", 202 pounds. And then another one of my guys in the Big Ten, Seth Lundy, 6'6", 219. I think these three will all be available at 31. Tristan da Silva, I think, might have some fans that he could sneak into the end of round one just because of the profile. So we'll start with Mr. da Silva. Again, listed at 6'8", 200 pounds. I got to see him up close and personal here in Tucson. And again, for those of you who don't know, I'm in Tucson. I teach at the University of Arizona. So if there's a Pac-12 guy, I probably saw him here. And Tristan da Silva is somebody that just stuck out to me. He does look that big, number one. The three-point shot didn't land that day, but man, he is physical. So here in the land of the sun, we had Azuolas Tubelis and Oumar Bala this year. And da Silva had to mix it up with these two because he's in this weird spot where sometimes he's playing like de facto center out there, being that tall, but he continued to post great numbers all year. 15.9 points per game, 4.8 rebounds, 1.3 assists, 1.3 steals, 0.4 blocks. And then his shooting splits were 54.5% from two, 39.4% from three, and then 75.5% from that free throw line. Has always been an efficient player. As a freshman, 57.3 true shooting. Sophomore, minutes go up, shots go up, 58.3%. Then this year as a junior is the lead guy along there with their lead guard, 58.5% career high. So as his shots have gone up, as his minutes has gone up, and his usage has gone up, he continues to be more and more efficient. That is one thing I always like to see in a prospect is like, hey, we're going to give you more responsibility, and then the player rewards them with more efficiency. And then at that size, 6'8", 200 pounds, he is versatile, would be the word I would say. Definitely probably slot him at the small forward more, but if you look at his defensive tape, he has to mix it up with the bigs.
He's played a lot more power forward at Colorado, yeah.
Yeah, he's had to mix it up with big man. Last year, they played him more kind of at shooting guard because of Jabari Walker was there. He kind of played more of the role that Tristan is in now. So he's been able to play multiple positions and defend multiple guards. I mean, I think he would be able to defend the shooting guard through the power forward in the NBA and maintain that efficiency. He's somebody I really buy into in terms of being somebody there at number 31.
Really interesting name. That was not one I was expecting to hear from you, Steve. So good job by you for catching me off guard. But I view him as more of a potential 2024 prospect. I haven't seen whether he's declared or not. But
he's declared, but he's maintaining his eligibility.
Okay, so that would make a lot of sense. But if he were to be in this draft and he kept his name in, why can't he be someone who's absolutely taken in the second round? You mentioned the athletic profile, the size, the length, the mobility he can offer you, being able to cover multiple positions, the efficiency. It's not just some of the splits that you rattled off. I'll give you some more synergy percentiles. 89th percentile on jump shots overall, 77th catch and shoot, 52nd on runners, 94th on dribble jumpers, and then he finishes well enough at the rim, close to 60% on attempts at the rim. So you're talking about efficient from everywhere. And you might not view Tristan as a high level self-shot creator, but somebody who can finish plays for you from all three levels on the floor if he's assisted. That's the type of guy that the Pistons fans are looking for anyways. You know who's going to have the ball in their hands. It's going to be Cade, it's going to be Ivy, whether there's a third guard in the mix, whatever the case may be. But they just need efficient guys who can finish plays and potentially defend multiple positions. And Tristan would certainly give that to you. So kudos by you for bringing up a really good sleeper.
Yeah, and the one thing he has over everybody on this list is 6'8". Like if you are going to be that defender and you're that size, then yeah, that's just going to be something that you're going to have over everybody else. And like you
Mhm.
said, looking at his shot chart, it is red. There is a lot of red. He is red from the left baseline. He's red from the right baseline. He's red in the paint. He's red from the right elbow. He's red from the right wing. He's red from the right corner, and he's red from the left wing. Like, this guy knows how to get his shots and drain them from a lot of
Yep.
different areas on the court, which is exactly what the team needs.
He,
Yep.
you could hear his name talked about more. I would imagine that he's probably going to be a G League elite camp guy. So like leading up to the combine, you're probably going to hear him talked about it. If he performs well there and he gets an invite to the real combine, who knows? Maybe Steve's right, and he's a guy who all of a sudden you just start hearing about him top 45, top 40, top 35, and he just keeps climbing.
Yeah, it comes from a basketball family too. His brother Oscar played at
Mm-hmm.
Stanford for 4 years, and I think he's playing in Germany now, if I
Yep.
remember correctly. So yeah, definitely got the background for it as well. Moving on to the next guy is Jordan Miller, somebody who I caught on to very, very late. Is a 5-year player, played his first 3 years of college ball at George Mason. Then after his junior season, transferred to Miami, where he looked kind of meh. And then this past season with the Hurricanes, they made it to the Final Four, fell just a little bit short. Jordan Miller, again, listed at 6'6", 202 pounds, put up 15.3 points per game, pulled in 6.2 rebounds, dished out 2.7 assists, 1.2 steals, 0.4 blocks, shooting splits of 60.2% from two, 35.2% from three, and then 78.4% from that free throw line. Defense, defense, defense. This guy will defend you the minute he wakes up,
Mm-hmm.
out of bed. He's just going to be on you all over the place. And really, I mean, I don't think it's that much of a stretch to say without Jordan Miller, Miami's defense would have crumbled, right?
No, it's not a stretch at all. And I do like what he brings to the table. Not that 6'8" guy like with the Silva, but a legitimate 6'7", right? He is long. I love his approach to defense. Always heads up, keeps his head on a swivel, knows what's going on at all times, able to play and defend in space, defend one-on-one. And then he is a really good rebounder for the position you'd expect him to play, which is that combo forward, right? That potential, that 4-3. I am concerned with the offense, though. So you mentioned the 3-point percentage isn't bad, but he's very low volume 3-point shooter throughout his career. He doesn't take a lot of them. I don't project him to make a lot of them at the NBA level. He was a really good slasher from Miami, especially in the tournament. But if he's not getting those same types of shots at the NBA level because he's not the burstiest, the most explosive guy, and it's one of these players who, okay, well, then he would try to back guys down and play more with his back to the basket. I'm not buying that fully translating at the NBA level. He has good touch, but eventually that touch has to extend out beyond the 3-point line. And if he's not a good 3-point shooter, then what are you looking at him to do necessarily from an offensive standpoint? So he could be one of these guys who, if more comes around for him offensively, really underrated guy, probably should end up going higher than wherever he could get drafted right now in 2023. But if more of that doesn't come around for him and he's more of like a one-trick pony, a defense only guy, then you're looking at him more as like that 45 to 60 pick, somebody who maybe he does even go undrafted. Maybe he is an undrafted free agent, but can still stick around, find ways to hang on the teams because of, as you said, how good he can be defensively.
Yeah, the one thing about him that makes me feel better, because I had those concerns at first and I didn't want to put him even in the top 58 this year, was every time he shot 70 or more 3-point attempts in a season, he posted 33% or higher.
Okay.
That is always good to me. It's like, okay, when you've shot more and your percentages were at their highest,
Yep.
a good indicator that, you know what, maybe you just need more reps, because shooting is one of those things that you only get better at it by putting more up. And again, the free throw percentage went up almost every year. It took a dip in his 4th year at Miami, but this year took the most free throws he's ever taken in his career at 125, and then posted a career high of 78.4%, which is a big improvement from where it was before. So I buy into this shooting improvement. I'm not saying he's going to step out there and be Klay Thompson or anything, right?
He does have really good, when he gets 2 feet in the paint and he's able to get to that floater, that push shot, he does have really good touch from that area, which matches up with the free throw percentage, which usually indicates if you have that level of touch, generally there is the foundation for you to extend your shot out the 3-point range. As you said, it's about confidence, composure. Is he willing to take the shots when he gets them? And what does his confidence look like? And if that's there for him, maybe he is more of a shooter than we would dare to give him credit for.
Yeah, and even when you look at his shot chart, like you just said, in the paint, he's 42 of 85. That's 49.4%. And at the rim, it's the shot he took the most, 182 shots. He drained 133 of them. He's shooting 73.1%. That is bananas for a wing or a guard to be shooting in the 70s like that. So this guy is going to finish. He's going to get contact. And then you just hope that the three-point shot comes around. There are indicators that it will. And oh, by the way, he's just a monster defender. Somebody I think, again, the Pistons should be looking at in that second round, even at 31, because this is the exact kind of player they need.
Yep. And listen, if his stock keeps going up and up and up because of what he did in the tournament, as well as what he can show in combines leading up to the draft, maybe his stock does rise that high. I'm not going to rule anything out in a crazy draft like it could be in 2023.
Yeah, I know Mark Schindler on Sam Vecini's Game Theory a couple pods back said he had him in the 25 to 35 range. I wouldn't doubt that that's going to happen because of the run that Miami made. And Jordan Miller. And when I was asking who the Malachi effect winner was, if you don't know what the Malachi effect is, Malachi Richardson, a Syracuse player, famously made this run in the NCAA tournament. Nobody really was talking about him before the draft. And then magically the Kings, LOL, selected him in the first round of the NBA draft because of that. And so Sam Vecini and Matt Penny named these things the Malachi effect of who's going to make a run in the tournament and then get their draft stock come up. And Sam Vecini responded to that tweet of like, I think Jordan Miller is the Malachi effect winner. So yeah, it wouldn't surprise me to see him at 25 to 35 range. Final guy we are not going to have shooting concerns with at all is Seth Lundy out of Penn State, 6'6", 219. He plays with my favorite guy, Jalen Pickett. I've been a big Jalen Pickett fan ever since his time at Siena. So glad to see them make that run, make it in the tournament this year in Seth Lundy's fourth year. Again, Seth Lundy is 6'6", 219 pounds, scored 14.2 points per game this year, 6.3 rebounds, 0.9 assists, 0.8 blocks, or 0.8 steals, 0.6 blocks. Shooting splits are 53.3% from two, 40% from three, and then 80.7% from that free throw line. Is a shooter. This is somebody whose three-point attempt rate for his entire career is 60.5. That is 60.5. So the majority of his shots come from long range, is a big dude as well. So that's a nice combination. And then this year, he pretty much put up career highs in everything. Shot attempts, all these other things, and true shooting percentage, which was 60.9%. That's 60.9%. So yeah, he's absolutely a shooter. And like you started off with saying, they need somebody who's kind of like this combo forward. Bam, here's a guy that fits that to a T, right?
I love Seth Lundy as a sleeper. And he, along with Landers Nolly out of Cincinnati, two guys who your audience, if they listen to me on other draft shows, they're probably going to hear me talking about those two guys as sleepers. Absolutely. Along with another guy in Gonzaga who maybe we get to him, maybe we don't. But Seth Lundy, I will not take credit for me loving Seth Lundy. I'll actually give the credit to my co-host on Draft Deeper, Maxwell Baumbach, who watched a lot of Big Ten basketball this year. And he tried to turn to us multiple times in No Ceiling to say, are we sure Seth Lundy isn't a guy? Like, are we positive he's not someone who could be targeted in the 23 draft? And you kept on seeing Jalen Pickett post these ridiculous box scores. And so you want to check him out as an NBA draft prospect. And the more you watch Penn State, the more you see, oh, there's this other guy other than Andrew Funk, other than Jalen Pickett, who's also knocking down a lion's share of the shots for them. And it's Seth Lundy because his perimeter stroke is just that pure. It's not just the 3-point game though, Steve. You've been loving going through a lot of shot charts and stuff for these guys and looking at what other types of attempts they're making. If you run him off a spot, he can get to a push shot. He can get to the rim. And when he gets to those spots, he finishes. So maybe he's not hitting a few killer crossovers or hitting you with some counter to get deeper in the paint. But if you give him a straight line drive, he can finish when he gets to the basket. So just how good he is as a shooter gives me a baseline that, again, maybe it's just me. I would like to have somebody like Seth Lundy, who I know I can get later. Maybe I don't even have to spend draft capital on him, then take somebody like a Jordan Miller because I buy that much into the 3-point shot. And when we do studies, when we look at guys who are actually playing 20 plus minutes a night in the NBA, more often than not, they're meeting certain parameters when it comes to shooting equity. If they aren't, then you better be like some of the best defensive guys in the entire NBA if you aren't. So it's much easier for me to buy into shooting than buy into potential non-shooting. I really like Seth Lundy as a guy who you can definitely get him in the back end of the second round. Maybe the Pistons don't even have to take him at 31. Maybe they just bring him in as an undrafted free agent and you're reaping the rewards.
Yeah, it would surprise me if he makes it past like 45, because if you look at his shot chart, every perimeter shot, every perimeter shot is red. Like you just look at it and you're like, man,
Yeah.
this guy doesn't have a weak area. And if the mandate is like, hey, we just need somebody to attack closeouts, why would you pass up 6'6", 219? Who again, every perimeter spot is red. Why would you pass it up?
To your point about attacking closeouts, it's in order to get a step on the defense, if you aren't the quickest guy, you need to bring them out to a certain point. When Lundy's shooting a lot of these threes, Steve, like they are deep threes. It's not just like his toes are right at the line and he's barely hitting that three. Like he is legitimately bringing guys out. And you need to be able to hit those deeper shots because the NBA line's that much further back. And we've seen younger guys, if you take them in the draft, you think they're shooters, it still takes them time to adjust to that other distance, that NBA line from 3-point range. I have zero doubts that Lundy can come in and hit a good percentage on NBA level threes, not just college threes.
Well, I feel the same. We've been talking about 31 this whole time. Let's talk about the draft pick that everybody really, really, really hopes for is number 1. You got Wembanyama, right?
Yeah, so Victor Wembanyama, it's easy, slam dunk number 1. We wouldn't have to talk about it.
I know it's almost anticlimactic at this point. It's just who's going to get number 1, and then at that point you can just.
It's more so like what ridiculous thing did Wembanyama do this week? Not necessarily breaking down his game.
Yeah, and I've been telling everybody now I'm not going to have a comp. I'm somebody who likes to try and find like a 1-to-1 comp, because I think if you're selling prospects, you have to say, okay, this is what I envision this player to do. With Wembanyama, it's an insult to give him a comp because there is no comp, right? So just the things that he's been able to do, there are shades of great players in there, but there's not one in particular where like, oh, he's going to be Rudy Gobert. You're like, yeah, but he also could do these weird one dribble floaters from 3-point range that nobody does. And other people have been like, oh, he's Kevin Durant. You're like, yeah, but he can also anchor the defense, which Kevin Durant can't do, even though Kevin Durant's a good player, right? And even when I've dug back further of like Yao Ming, I'm like, Yao Ming probably couldn't jump over a phone book or run the way that Wembanyama has. And even further back than that, the first alien was probably Ralph Sampson in terms of like a big that could shoot it like that. And even then it's like, no, Ralph was looking to just run you over and back you down, whereas Wembanyama is not like that.
Ralph doesn't move like Victor, or didn't move, I should say, like Victor does.
Yeah, absolutely. So what about at pick number 2 to 3? What would your advice be for Pistons fans? Like, who do you think they should take at 2 to 3?
It is a massive debate. It's one that sent draft Twitter into an absolute frenzy a few weeks ago, because you have Brandon Miller, who is much more projectable for certain teams within certain lineup constructions than somebody like a Scoot Henderson. But I would still take Scoot at 2. I would 100%, for me, take the best player available at 2. I think he has a legitimately very high ceiling as a point guard. The type of talent that he has, I've said Chris Paul 2.0 in the past, and I won't back off that. I think he's 19 years old. We've seen him put up great numbers in a professional league 2 years in a row. I get that he had some of the shooting slumps the last month and a half in the G League, but what did Brandon Miller do his last few weeks in college for Alabama? He was a non-factor in the NCAA tournament. And I'm not basing a year's worth of evaluation on the tournament, but if we just want to try and compare sample sizes in terms of week-to-week stretches, Brandon Miller has had some games and some lows that have been comparable to Scoot. So I don't necessarily put too much stock into that equation. But when I evaluate Brandon Miller, I think he's going to be a good player. He's somebody who he would be. If the Pistons had the number 3 pick, that's who I'm taking. I'm running up to the podium. I'm taking him. But when you talk about taking him at number 2 and taking him over Scoot Henderson, that means if Victor Wembanyama wasn't in this draft, you'd be saying that Brandon Miller could be a potential number 1 overall pick. I don't see that type of ceiling with him. I think he's going to be a good complementary piece, but when we project him out to be like a featured scorer on a team that you're expecting to be in the mix to win a championship, I don't see that for him. I do think that Scoot Henderson can be maybe not your best overall player when you win a championship, because how many guards have actually done that in the NBA, but can he be a top guy on some nights in the playoffs? Absolutely, I buy that. Can he be the number 2 player on a championship team? I'm absolutely buying into that. I'm not buying into it as much with Brandon Miller. And that's why Scoot Henderson, a player who I've seen the game look hard at times for Brandon Miller, I've never seen the game look hard for Scoot, even when, he commits some of the turnovers because he tries to be a little too creative, even when some of the shots aren't falling, it doesn't look hard for him. And that's why I'm buying him as my number 2 pick.
So just to call back to the previous episode with Bryce Simon of Motor City Hoops, if you haven't listened to that episode, go listen to it. We talked about possible trade down scenarios. Is there a scenario in which the Pistons should trade down? Somebody, give you an example. Our best trade offer was Orlando has, what pick did they secure, 6 or was it 5?
So I believe right now they're in pole position for like 6 or 7, I think. I don't think they're in the top 5.
And then 10 is their other pick, if I remember correctly.
11. I think 11.
So say they call up and they're like, okay, we'll give you pick number 6, we'll give you pick number 11, and we will also give you Franz Wagner. Do the Pistons trade down with something like that?
From number 2, they could. I mean, if that's a great, first of all, I don't even know if Orlando would do that. But if they called up and said, we would give you all of that, I think you'd kind of have to do it.
Yeah, because there were a couple like that where like Portland could theoretically offer Shaedon Sharpe in their 2 picks, right? Something like those. Is that something they should realistically be like, you know what, I think this is probably better than trying to force Ivy, Cade, and Scoot to do something together?
If it's just for the draft picks, I'd say no. If you're throwing in a player like a Franz, I think you would have to really think about doing it, because Franz has been much better than I anticipated coming out of college. Like I had him as a top 10 guy, but my really, really high end comp for him was Gordon Hayward. And now I actually think that ceiling is like a legitimate possibility for who he can be. And Gordon Hayward, once upon a time, was a top 5 small forward in the NBA. So if that's the type of piece you can put around Caden Ivey, and you can recoup 2 other lottery picks for number 2, I believe in Scoot Henderson. I believe in him greatly. But that type of trade, yeah, that would be a 4 or 5 hour meeting in the war room to figure out what you're doing.
Yeah, you really have to wait until the very last minute and then just pray you made the right decision, because either way you would get greatness. Okay, last question. 4 and 5. Say the Pistons fall to either 4 or 5. Who would you say the team should take there, and what would distinguishes 4 from 5, and like who you would take over the other?
So I'm a Jarace Walker guy at 4 overall on my board. I really like his 2-way potential. I think that the offense is going to be more legit than I think he's getting credit for. One of the things, if your audience hasn't watched Corey's film session with Marcus Sasser dropped some breadcrumbs to Corey about how he thinks Jarace had one of the best handles on the team, period. And that's a team where you had Sasser, you had Shed, you had Mark, you had really skilled guard/wing types who were actual creators for that team. And yet Jarace, who had lower volume, lower responsibility within the construct of the team, telling me he could be as skilled or more skilled than some of those guys while he's 6'8", 240 pounds, able to back you down, able to cover so much ground defensively, play multiple positions, rebound well. That's the guy who, maybe he doesn't have the sexiest upside, Steve, but I trust the floor and who he's going to be long-term. And that's why I would have him at 4. But I thought about giving you Cam Whitmore at 4 because this is a Pistons conversation. I don't know how you feel about Cam Whitmore. I think he's gone to the point where now he's become undervalued. And I think people are rocketing him down to the bottom end of the top 10 or maybe even late lottery. I think there's been way too much concern about the passing. I get it. I get it. He's not tossing a bunch of assists around. He can have tunnel vision at times. I would actually invite people to go back and watch more of the Villanova games, because when he caught the ball in some of these possessions, I'm specifically thinking about the one game where I actually got to see him up close and personal in Philadelphia. The amount of times he got the ball with more than like 5 seconds left on the shot clock were like few and far between. So if you're getting him the ball, if he's not initiating the offense, if you have these other guards who are dribbling the air out of the ball, and then it's, oh, by the way, we got to make something happen with it, you're kicking it over to Cam. Well, Cam's not going to have a lot of time to necessarily look around everywhere and try and fire off another pass. He's going to shoot it. He's going to look to drive it, or he's going to look to shoot it. So I think some of that was a little bit overblown But the pure offensive talent, right? I do buy the spot up shooting coming around for him. I do buy the mid range and the post up game are going to come around for him at some point. He's already an excellent finisher around the basket. And then he's probably one of the more versatile defenders that I don't think we hear enough about his defense either. Like I've literally watched him cover someone like Jordan Hawkins and then go and cover one of UConn's post players on the other end or vice versa in a lot of these other games. Like he is someone who I think could actually guard 1 through 4, yet no one is talking about it. They just want to focus on 1 or 2 things about his offense. So you guys need a 3. You said it right early on. You guys need a small forward. Why not possibly look at Cam Whitmore that high? So it's a toss up for me. I have Jairus 4 on my board, but if you want to talk yourself in the Cam, I could go for it.
Ain't no talking into here. I have Cam Whitmore at number 4, and Bryce Simon.
Okay.
I mean, what you just said is basically what we said last week too. Of like the defense is really where we love him more and see him fitting in to this Pistons team. If you don't have Cam Whitmore in your top 10 anymore, I'm like, are you not watching film? Like, what's going on? I understand if you don't have him in your top 5, even though I really strongly disagree with it. But like, if you don't have him in top 10, like again, like, what are you doing? Yeah, and you're preaching to the choir here about the passing. So on the Resball pod a couple months ago, I did one on assist percentage with GG Jackson and Cam Whitmore. Mm-hmm. There's actually a historical precedence for guys that have under 10% assist percentage and are over 25% usage rate that end up being really good players, because a lot of these guys are like on teams where it's like, who's the better option? Like, do you really want to pass the ball away? And there were a couple guys on there like John Collins, TJ Warren, who are like, okay, but then there's more higher up guys like Kevin Durant, where again, it's like KD wasn't passing the ball because what was the better option on that team? Yep. There is no better option. And I'm glad you brought up the point with Villanova too. That Villanova team did not pass the ball. Their top playmaker only dished out 86 assists. And then their Justin Moore was their top playmaker at 21.8% assist percentage. Everybody else on that team was under 17% assist percentage. They were a terrible passing team, so that has to be also taken into a context with that.
They won the worst college offense I had to watch in personal word this year. Last year was Memphis. This year was Villanova.
Well, I mean, I watched a lot of South Carolina, so that kind of the award there went to them just because I'm really big into GG Jackson. But yeah, the Cam and the Villanova team was right up there too, though. I remember the first couple games I was excited to watch, and then by game 10, I was like,
yeah,
I hope Cam has a big game at least. Yeah, it was not fun. So there's that. The other guy I've been arguing for in this like 3 to 4 range or 4 to 5 range, is Asar Thompson, because I think there are other things like that. Yeah, the shooting concerns are there, but I think what has really leapfrogged him for me over his brother is like when he goes through shooting slumps, he doesn't care. He ended the year terribly, right? He in the regular season shot it and just missed him brick after brick, and then went in their playoffs and just was on fire, right? Just didn't seem to miss. Shot really good percentage in their playoffs. The best indicator of it for me was in the preseason, where he took something like 24 3-point attempts, and then they toured with professional teams, right? The Adelaide 36ers, Mega, all these grown adults. He didn't hit a single 3-pointer. He went 0 for 0%, and everybody's like, well, I guess Asar is going to be like late first round or whatever. But then came out of the season like gangbusters, had that slump down the stretch, and then came back. Super good indicators to me, because as a shooter, the number one way to get out of a shooting slump is just keep shooting. And Asar has shown that. Like, I don't care if I airball these things, because I know the only way to get that muscle memory back and the only way to get better at it is to do it under live fire and to keep at it. So, and then you add on top of that, he's also a really good defender that you're going to stick on the wing, maybe even all the way to power forward. Oh, by the way, he's also a good athlete, really super underrated cutter. I think his feel of like getting the back door and finding those spots to get up for lobs. And Cade here loves his lob passes. So this is another teammate I think who would be a perfect complement for Cade. And then you work on the shooting to be more of a supplementary thing. And he's not going to be, dribbling the air out of the ball. He's going to work his way as a supplementary guy. And there is that ceiling of like, maybe he will be number 2, number 3 down the line. I really buy into Asar Thompson for the Pistons.
His overall feel I think is the biggest selling point for him, right? Like maybe he's not the flashy guy or he's not as good of an athlete between him and his brother Aman, although I think that gap is much closer than people would probably care to admit. But I trust him to do a lot, enough of the right basketball things on the court. And then to your point about the shooting and his projectability as far as that, if you're playing on the wing, you have to be able to shoot the ball. It's just like you just have to be able to do it. And Asar's shown enough growth with his jump shot to where I'm buying him as one of these guys who I think can fit in off the ball, can be a secondary, tertiary creator because the passing's better than it would get credit for. And then I think the defensive playmaking is there. That would be my main concern is if you are looking to draft him as a 3-man, I don't think he has one of these body types that's going to get bigger necessarily. I think he'll get stronger in the NBA. I don't know if he's ever going to fill out to the point where you want him guarding every single 3-man in the NBA. He might be better off guarding 2s. That would be like my one main concern with him. But everything else, I can buy in with you in terms of being a fit.
So we'll end with your guy, Jarris Walker, who I'm a gigantic fan of. I've said this a lot. Nobody's responded to me because I think they're just like, whatever, man. I think that Jarris Walker could be like OG Anunoby and slot over to the 3. So if the Pistons selected him at number 5, is there a possibility to where it's like Cade, Ivy, Jarris, Beef Stew, and Jalen Duren? Like, is that a real legitimate possible lineup?
I don't see why not. I think it's more so it's not just about the offense. So this is probably how you would answer the question. Your position is generally defined by who you can guard. And I think Jarris is going to be able to guard 3s, 4s. At some point, I think he is going to be able to be like a small ball big in a lineup. So think about how much versatility could be there. And if he's holding his own against that positional group on defense, why can't he play that offensively, right? He's going to be spacing the floor. He's a spot up guy. You can get him the ball, high-low offense between him and another big or him and 2 bigs. Like, why can't you incorporate him into that type of lineup?
I love it. At least I call the Beef Stew and Jalen Duren the double beef lineup. So with Jarris, we got triple beef now.
Listen, man, hey, in defense of that lineup, I wanted to see it last year at Summer League because I really thought it could work. I believed in Stewart's shooting going back to Washington.
I still believe in it. So
your guy Corey was like, I don't want to see that lineup. And then he started hitting 3s in front of us at Summer League. And I'm like, that's right. I want to see more of that lineup. I think it's legit. I think Stewart has more shooting touch than we've given him credit for. So
yeah, again, look at his numbers before the shoulder injury and after the shoulder injury. Those really tell the tale of like his ability to be a shooter. I'm going to just go out on a limb and say next year, I think fully healthy, good shoulder, he'll still put up like 38% from 3 on a good volume of attempts because he's that level of worker. He's the non-Cade Piston I believe in the most just because I believe in the person.
There you go. And if Duren comes around more defensively in terms of being a little bit more switchable, defending in space, like we projected him to, and he's still really young, but if that happens, that bodes even more for that type of lineup.
Yeah, and I think that's another, silver lining, golden lining, whatever you want to call it, for drafting Jarris if he ended up at like number 5 or whatever, is that, Duren's struggling, then you can just move Jarris and, Beef Stew down to 4 and 5. And then play that way because both of those players are super switchable. Jarris has that passing ability that he showed in high school that was fantastic that Houston didn't let him flash enough that I think is going to blossom again back in the NBA. So yeah, can't say enough great about Jarris Walker, and especially for the Detroit Pistons, one of the rare fan bases that stresses defense and everything. You cannot stress how rare it is to find a prospect that a team that has national title aspirations in Houston was like, oh, you're coming in and we're just going to turn the defense over to you. Like offensively, that happens more often than not. But defensively, I don't even know the last.
What, did he block 7 shots in that one tournament game or something crazy like that?
Yeah.
Had a lid on the rim.
Yeah. And I mean, he's not, they already had a good defense, but just if you watch tape last year and tape this year, it's like, wow, the difference because of just this one freshman, that's a rare commodity.
Yep. 100%. I agree.
All right. So thank you so much again to Nathan Grubel, Mr. Draft Keeper. Definitely go follow No Ceilings. Definitely listen to the podcast feed there. You can find it on Google, Apple Podcasts, Spotify, wherever you get your podcasts. So what do you got coming up next for us at the No Ceilings Hive Mind?
So next for me, I will be publishing the final edition of my rookie rank coming up this Monday. So I'm really excited to dig into what my all rookie first and second team ballots would look like, including who I would have as rookie of the year. And then the week after that, I'm going to be writing about a sleeper who I've heard zero people talk about him as a top 60 guy. I think he's got a shot, Anton Watson out of Gonzaga. I really like his game. The more you dig into the numbers, I think he's going to be a sneaky good NBA player. So I will give some insight into one of my sleepers that I've really been enjoying.
Again, go follow this man on Twitter. Can you give us your Twitter handle again?
Absolutely. You can follow me on Twitter at Draft Deeper. And for everyone in No Ceilings, just follow the collective at No Ceilings NBA.
Do you have any other social media you'd like to plug?
I do not. Twitter is the main place where you can find me, but the DMs are open. So if you have any questions about prospects, want to talk hoops, I'm always available.
Thank you so much again for being on. Couldn't thank you enough. Who better to talk about pick number 31 than Mr. Draft Deeper? We will catch you next time on the Woodward Pistons podcast. I'm sorry Joe Dumars couldn't, chime in, but he's a little busy. He's calling over to Serbia about something. He doesn't seem very happy about it though. So we shall see you next time.